Friday nights in 1959 meant something special. You'd gather around the television, turn down the lights, and wait for that opening narration. Rod Serling's voice would tell you about a fifth dimension, and for the next half hour, you'd forget everything else. The Twilight Zone became more than just a television show. It changed what people expected from their entertainment. Today, we're looking at The Twilight Zone, 1959. 10 wild facts you didn't know. Number 10. Rod Serling almost didn't narrate his own show. When The Twilight Zone was being developed, Rod Serling had no intention of appearing on camera or even providing the narration. He was a writer, not an actor. The job originally went to Westbrook Van Voorhis, a professional narrator who had made his name on the March of Time radio program during the Great Depression and World War II. Van Voorhis recorded the opening narration for the pilot episode Where Is Everybody?, which aired on October 2, 1959. CBS executives watched the pilot and made their decision quickly. According to William Self, a CBS executive at the time, Van Voorhis had a big, authoritative voice, but it sounded too pompous for the show they were trying to create. The network wanted something different. They needed a voice that would invite viewers in, rather than lecture them. After Van Voorhis was replaced, the network floated the idea of hiring Orson Welles. That would have been fitting. Welles had terrified America with his War of the Worlds radio broadcast and certainly had the right kind of voice. His theatrical presence could have worked well with the material, but Welles wanted more money than the sponsors were willing to pay. The budget simply wouldn't stretch that far. Finally, Serling himself suggested he could do it. The network was skeptical. They knew him as a writer, not as someone who worked in front of a microphone. Serling had no training as an actor or narrator, but he did a test recording, and it worked. His delivery was different, more conversational, less theatrical. It felt personal, like he was letting you in on a secret. There was something about his cadence and tone that perfectly matched the show's sensibility. What's interesting is that even after Serling became the narrator, viewers didn't actually see him during the first season. They only heard his voice. He wouldn't make his first on-camera appearance until the final episode of Season 1, A World of His Own, where the main character literally erases Serling from existence by throwing his tape into a fire. Number 9. The opening said Sixth Dimension. At first, everyone knows the famous opening narration about the fifth dimension. It became one of the most recognizable pieces of television dialogue ever written. But originally, Serling wrote something different. When Serling first recorded the opening for the pilot, he said there was a sixth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It sounded impressive. The words flowed well together. The problem was that nobody had any idea what that meant. What exactly was being counted as dimensions? CBS executive William Self listened to the recording and asked Serling a simple question. What is the sixth dimension? Serling apparently didn't have an answer ready. He had written it because it sounded good, not because he had worked out the mathematics. Self pointed out that most people only knew about 4 dimensions: height, width, depth, and time. Serling thought about it and agreed. The sixth dimension was one too many. They went back and re-recorded the opening before the show aired. The sixth dimension became the fifth dimension. It was a small change, but it mattered. The new version made just enough sense to work without making too much sense. That balance became part of what made The Twilight Zone special. The show dealt with ideas that were familiar but slightly off. Reality with a twist. Calling it the fifth dimension suggested something just beyond normal understanding, not completely impossible to imagine, but not quite within reach either. Number 8. The show cost more than most half-hour programs. Television production in 1959 operated on tight budgets. Half-hour shows were expected to be cheap and quick to produce. The Twilight Zone didn't follow those rules. Each episode cost between $50,000 and $70,000 to produce. That was expensive for a half-hour show. Most other half-hour programs at the time cost a fraction of that amount. The money showed up on screen. The sets were detailed and convincing. The production values looked more like a movie than a typical television program. Serling and his team refused to cut corners on quality. CBS programming executive James Aubrey became a problem for the show because of these costs. He constantly pushed to reduce the budget. He saw the Twilight Zone as unnecessarily expensive and wanted it produced more efficiently. Associate producer Del Reisman said Aubrey was particularly tough on the Twilight Zone specifically because it was so costly for its length. The network wanted cheaper programming that would deliver similar ratings. During the second season, Aubrey ordered 7 fewer episodes than the first season. He also mandated that 6 episodes be shot on videotape rather than film as another cost-cutting measure. Serling hated this decision. He called the videotape episodes neither fish nor fowl. They looked different from the rest of the series, and the limitations of videotape at that time meant the episodes had to be shot like live television with multiple cameras on a soundstage. The videotape experiment was abandoned after those 6 episodes. They remain visually distinct from the rest of the series. If you watch them today, you can immediately tell which episodes were shot on tape. Number 7. Serling wrote more than half the episodes himself. The Twilight Zone ran for 5 seasons and produced 156 episodes. Rod Serling wrote or co-wrote 92 of them. That's a staggering amount of work for one person. Writing that many teleplays, while also serving as executive producer and narrator, would have exhausted anyone. Serling initially wanted to give new writers a chance to break into television. He believed the show could be a training ground for fresh talent. The show received over 14,000 script submissions. Most of them were either unread or unsuitable. The quality wasn't there. Many submissions completely missed what the show was trying to accomplish. Serling realized he needed reliable writers who understood what the show was trying to do. He turned to Richard Matheson, Charles Beaumont, and George Clayton Johnson. These 3 writers, along with Serling himself, were responsible for 127 of the 156 total episodes. They became the core creative team. Each writer brought something different to the show, but all of them understood the importance of that final twist, that moment where everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down. Matheson, who wrote classics like Nightmare at 20,000 Feet and Steel, later mentioned an odd rule. According to Matheson, only Serling was allowed to use the word God in his scripts. If Matheson tried to use it, the network would cross it out. He never understood why that rule existed, and Serling never explained it. Serling drew on his own experiences for many episodes. He had served in the Philippines during World War II as a paratrooper. Combat and the unpredictability of death became recurring themes. Boxing, military life, and airplane pilots appeared frequently because Serling knew those worlds. Number 6. Bernard Herrmann wrote the original theme music. When most people think of the Twilight Zone theme, they hear Marius Constant's iconic melody. But that wasn't the original music for the show. Bernard Herrmann, one of the most prominent film composers of his time, wrote the theme music for the first season. Herrmann had scored major films including Citizen Kane and Vertigo. His music for the Twilight Zone was darker and more dramatic than what would eventually become the standard. Herrmann composed original scores for 7 episodes during the first season, including Where Is Everybody?, Walking Distance, and The Lonely. His music gave those episodes a cinematic quality that elevated them beyond typical television fare. The orchestral arrangements were rich and complex, particularly for a television show. The theme most people recognize today came later. Marius Constant wrote it for the second season. His composition had a simpler, more memorable quality. It could instantly signal that you were entering the Twilight Zone. Those opening notes became iconic. You could hear just a few seconds and immediately know what show you were watching. Interestingly, Constant's theme wasn't particularly well known as his work for nearly 20 years. When Warner Brothers prepared to release the soundtrack to Twilight Zone, the movie in 1983, Constant finally received proper credit. CBS actually sued Constant in 1984 to establish rights to the music. They reached a settlement where Constant would have future rights to his work, but had to give up any claim to past royalties. Number 5. The show featured future stars early in their careers. The Twilight Zone had remarkable casting. Mildred Guss and John Erman brought in some of the best talent available, including many actors who would become major stars later. They had an eye for recognizing potential and weren't afraid to take chances on relatively unknown performers. Robert Redford appeared in an early episode before he became Hollywood royalty. At the time, he was just another young actor trying to build a career. William Shatner guest starred in 2 episodes before landing the role of Captain Kirk on Star Trek. His first appearance was in Nick of Time, where he played a man obsessed with a fortune-telling machine. His most famous appearance, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, with the gremlin on the airplane wing, became one of the series' most iconic episodes. That gremlin scene would be parodied and referenced for decades. George Takei, who would later play Sulu on Star Trek, appeared in The Encounter, an episode that dealt with World War II and racial tensions. The episode's controversial content led CBS to pull it from rotation. It only aired once during the original run and wasn't shown again for decades. The subject matter was considered too sensitive for the time. Carol Burnett, before her legendary variety show, appeared in a 3rd season episode called Cavender is Coming. Ron Howard, already a child star from The Andy Griffith Show, showed up in Walking Distance when he was just 6 years old. Cloris Leachman, Julie Newmar, Mickey Rooney, Charles Bronson, and Donald Pleasance all made appearances. The show attracted serious actors who recognized the quality of the writing. These weren't just guest spots to fill out a contract. These were challenging roles that let actors show their range. Number 4. One episode was actually a French film. During the 5th season, the show's budget became even tighter. Serling needed to fill the schedule, but didn't have enough money to produce all original episodes. He came up with an unusual solution. He paid between $20,000 and $25,000 for the rights to broadcast An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, a French short film directed by Robert Enrico. The film was based on the Ambrose Bierce short story about a Confederate sympathizer who appears to escape hanging during the Civil War. The film had won the Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Subject in 1963. Serling acquired it, added his opening and closing narrations, and aired it as a Twilight Zone episode on February 28, 1964. No additional filming was required beyond Serling's narration segments. The episode stands out because it's entirely in French with no dialogue, just visual storytelling and a musical score. It remains one of the most powerful episodes in the series, despite being the only one not originally produced for the show. This cost-saving measure helped Serling stretch his budget, but it also demonstrated his willingness to find creative solutions to practical problems. He recognized quality storytelling regardless of its origin. Number 3. Burgess Meredith appeared 4 times. Burgess Meredith holds the record, along with Jack Klugman, for the most appearances on The Twilight Zone. He starred in 4 different episodes across multiple seasons. His first appearance, Time Enough at Last, became one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. Meredith played Henry Bemis, a mild-mannered bank teller who loves reading but is constantly interrupted by his wife and boss. After a nuclear war leaves him as the sole survivor, he's thrilled because he finally has time to read. Then he breaks his glasses. The episode's cruel twist became legendary. It perfectly captured the show's ability to be both deeply sad and darkly ironic at the same time. Meredith returned for Mr. Dingle the Strong in the 2nd season, playing a meek vacuum cleaner salesman who receives superhuman strength from aliens. The episode was lighter in tone, almost comedic, showing Meredith could handle different styles. He appeared again in The Obsolete Man, a heavy-handed but effective episode about a librarian in a totalitarian state where books are banned. This episode showcased his dramatic intensity. His final appearance came in Printer's Devil, where he played the devil making a deal with a suicidal newspaperman. Meredith's versatility showed in each role. He could play sympathetic victims and charming villains with equal skill. Each performance felt completely different from the others. At the time, Meredith was already an established Broadway actor. He would later become famous as the Penguin in the Batman television series and as Mickey, Rocky Balboa's trainer, in the Rocky films. His Twilight Zone appearances showcased the dramatic range that would define his entire career. Number 2, the show only had moderate ratings despite critical acclaim. The Twilight Zone won numerous awards during its original run. It received Emmy Awards, a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, and praise from critics. In January 1960, the Screen Producers Guild declared it the best produced television film series of 1959. FCC Commissioner Newton Minow specifically mentioned it in his famous Vast Wasteland speech about television as one of the few quality programs on the air. Critics recognized its importance immediately. Despite this recognition, the show never achieved huge ratings. It had loyal fans, but it wasn't a massive hit. The network canceled it twice. Both times, enough people complained that CBS brought it back. The show existed in that difficult space where critics loved it, but mass audiences didn't always tune in. The 4th season tried a different format. The episodes were expanded to an hour. Serling hated this decision. He felt the show worked best at a half-hour length. The longer episodes, he said, felt padded. They lost the sharp, twist-driven impact that made the show special. The pacing suffered. Stories that could be told perfectly in 30 minutes got stretched thin over 60. The 5th season returned to half-hour episodes, but the budget remained tight. By January 1964, CBS announced the show's cancellation for the 3rd and final time. According to producer William Frug, CBS executive Jim Aubrey had simply grown tired of the show. He claimed it was over budget and the ratings weren't good enough. Serling himself was exhausted. After 5 years and 156 episodes, with 92 of them written by him, he was ready to move on. He didn't fight the cancellation this time. The show ended on June 19, 1964. Number 1. Serling sold his rights to the show. After The Twilight Zone ended, Rod Serling made a decision that would have long-term consequences. He sold his rights to the series back to CBS. It seemed like a practical business decision at the time. His wife later explained that Serling believed his production company, Cayuga Productions, would never recoup the production costs. The show frequently went over budget. Even though it had won awards and earned critical praise, it wasn't making the kind of money Serling had hoped for. The financial reality didn't match the artistic success. This decision ultimately allowed CBS to profit from the show's enduring popularity. The Twilight Zone never died. It went into syndication and found new audiences every decade. The network owned it completely and earned money from reruns, merchandise, and licensing. What seemed like a reasonable business decision in 1964 meant Serling and his family missed out on decades of residual income. Ironically, selling the rights also made revivals possible. CBS could greenlight new versions without needing Serling's approval. A feature film came out in 1983. 3 different television revivals were attempted in 1985, 2002, and 2019. None of them matched the original's success, but they all happened because CBS owned the property. Serling died in 1975 at age 50 from complications after heart surgery. He never saw how influential his show would become. The Twilight Zone defined what anthology television could be. It proved that science fiction and fantasy could address serious social issues. It showed that television could be art. These 10 facts only scratch the surface of what made The Twilight Zone remarkable. The show changed television. It demonstrated that audiences were ready for something smarter, stranger, and more thought-provoking than what networks typically offered. It proved that television could tackle difficult subjects and challenge viewers. Rod Serling fought constantly with sponsors and executives who wanted safe, unchallenging content. He battled censorship on his earlier dramatic works and found freedom in science fiction. He used science fiction and fantasy as a way to discuss racism, war, nuclear anxiety, and the human condition. By setting stories in other dimensions or future worlds, he could say things that would have been censored in realistic dramas. A story about prejudice worked better when the characters were aliens or had pig faces. The show's influence extends far beyond its 5-year run. You can see its impact in Lost, Black Mirror, The X-Files, and countless other series that blend genre storytelling with social commentary. Every anthology show since then exists in its shadow. The phrase Twilight Zone entered the language as a way to describe surreal or unsettling experiences. People use it without even thinking about where it came from. For those who watched it during its original broadcast, the Twilight Zone provided something television had never really offered before. It treated viewers as intelligent adults who could handle complex ideas and ambiguous endings. Not every episode worked perfectly, but when the show hit its mark, it created moments of television that have never been equaled. The black and white photography, the twist endings, Serling's measured narration, the willingness to be strange and dark and philosophical, all of it combined to create something unique. Decades later, new generations continue discovering the show. The best episodes hold up remarkably well. Time enough at last. To serve man, the monsters are due on Maple Street. Eye of the Beholder. These stories still work because they tap into universal fears and desires that don't change with time. If you enjoyed learning about the show that defined television science fiction, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more nostalgic trips through television history.